Fantasy Podcast. News, reviews, and interviews from the world of myth and legend. With your host, Oliver McNeil.
Legend quests. It's not just one quest, it's legend quests. Dungeon adventures here.
Imagine your favourite fantasy game, be that computer, board game, role-playing or book, and then imagine entering that game for real. Created with theatrical props, actors, stage illusion and puppets, we want your help in creating a portable, adaptable, live dungeon experience.
We've assembled the most amazing team of fantasy experts to bring you this incredible experience.
As the voice of the dungeon, we have none other than legendary actor Tom Baker.
Our project advisor is the gaming god Ian Livingstone, creator of Games Workshop, the Fighting Fantasy books, and Tomb Raider.
To create the illusions, we are delighted to have internationally recognised magical prop designer Dan Baines.
For the puppets and creature work, we have Doctor Who's Mark Corduroy.
Our writing team has contributions from the incredible Jamie Thompson, author of Fabled Lands and Dark Lord. We also have Fighting Fantasy's own Jonathan Green, who's also written Star Wars and Doctor Who game books. The curtains open, revealing a newly created dungeon space. Members of the audience move into that space and proceed through the adventure together. Oliver and I have been working in the theatre and interactive entertainment industries for 30 years.
And now we want to offer that experience to everybody. So whether you come to here in Bodiam to see the dungeon yourself, or if we take it to you.
That's right. The dungeon is designed to travel and to fit into a space of approximately 100 square metres. So whether you come to us or we come to you, we can guarantee you a great adventure. We're offering some amazing and unique rewards. So please check them out and let's make this fantasy a reality.
I'll be there, Oliver. I'll be there. And you'll be there. It'll be worth it, yes. Legend quests.
Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Oliver McNeil. Now, it's been quite an amazing week in my fantasy life because I did an interview with Joe Diva, one of my heroes of the game book world, which will be coming up later on Skype. And also it's been a little bit of a roller coaster because of the Kickstarter that's going to be launching this Friday, which is the 18th of September. Okay, now our Kickstarter, it's creating a live fantasy dungeon, and we've got an incredible team of fantasy experts involved. Now we've got the voice of the dungeon, which is going to be Tom Baker. Yes, Doctor Who's Tom Baker. And we will be booming his voice and assisting people throughout the adventures. We also have Ian Livingstone. Yes, the Ian Livingstone. And he's going to be our project advisor. We have the incredible illustrators Russ Nicholson and Malcolm Barter. Now both these guys worked on the original Fighting Fantasy books. Russ Nicholson did the Warlock of Vardock Mountain, and Malcolm Barter did all the illustrations for the Forest of Doom. Both these guys have been doing all kinds of game books and things since then, and they both work in the industry today. They are creating some amazing rewards for us. They're designing some magical items. We have a thing called the Chaos Pendant and also the Wizard's Talisman. Now they're doing these beautiful illustrations for us, and we're going to get them crafted and you can actually have these as rewards and own something really unique from our dungeon. Now, who else have got involved? We've got Jamie Thompson. Now, Jamie Thompson's it. I'm going to be interviewing tomorrow Darren Lewis, and we're going to be releasing that podcast in a couple of weeks' time. Now, he's also a game book designer. His series is called Fabled Lands. He also has one called, it's not a game book, but it's a series of children's books called the Dark Lord series. So, who else? Oh, sorry, Jonathan Green. Now, Jonathan Green, he also wrote the Fighting Fantasy books, and he's writing new ones as we speak, including an Alice in Wonderland themed one, which he got kickstarted himself, and he's going to be writing some adventures. We also have some really cool guys who actually write for AD&D, who are creating things for us. Do you know, every day when I open my email, there's something new. So if this is a bit dated by the time this comes up, something else has happened. But all I can say is it's adding on to the amazing experience we're going to be creating for you. So, 18th of September, that is this Friday coming. Go and have a look at it. Kickstarter. It's called Legend Quests Live Dungeon Adventures. Okay, now, while I'm here, now this is only going to be relevant for our video viewers. This here is some of the quality of the props and makeup and masks that we're going to be using for the dungeon. So it's not, don't get it confused with LARPing. It's not LARP. It's something very different. My background, as I keep telling you on these podcasts, it was theatre and prop making and designing. So I really want lighting to be perfect. I want the scenery to be film quality. I want the sound to be amazing. I want it to be as an immersive experience as possible. It's going to be amazing, guys. I promise you. Anyway, right, now coming up, now we have the Joe Diva interview. Now, Joe, really lovely guy, very generous with his time. And here's the interview. There's a little bit I'm going to add at the end, because we've missed out. There we go. And I hope you enjoy it.
Here's our special guest interview.
Excellent.
Hurrah!
The wonders of technology.
Yeah, this is my first time on Skype, so.
Oh, really? Well,
yeah.
Welcome to Skype.
I normally sort of meet up with my my interviewees, and but this is quite good.
Right.
I've got a call recorder going, so.
Very good. Okay.
This will, fingers crossed.
You're
work.
okay on sound, because that's what you'll need, isn't it?
You know, the sound is very good, actually. Yeah. How's mine? You can hear me okay?
No, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Superb. Well, thank you very much for agreeing to do this. It's very kind. I know you're very
Pleasure.
busy. Are those all miniatures in the back there?
Yes.
I've got my
That's the work table.
Got my dragon out specially.
Really? Okay, it's very
Fine.
impressive.
That's
It looks like he's whispering in your ear.
And there's my goblin head. So
Yeah,
that's
looks
what
a
we're
bit
using
like
for...
Pinhead out of
Oh, he did. Yeah, he's actually got some rather
out of Hellraiser.
He's got very nice sort of antlers on at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm all gearing up for
Look
this.
at the workshop there. That's my painting table.
Yeah. So you still paint then? You still?
Yeah,
going?
occasionally. Yeah, sort
Wow.
of 2 or 3 times a week.
That's
It's quite
fantastic.
relaxing. It's
Yeah.
good breathing space to come up with ideas. So I'll mull over things while I'm painting.
Fantastic.
It's either that or when I'm swimming. So that's where I get my best ideas formulate, either in the pool or at the work desk.
God. Well, I mean, I've obviously been reading. We'll just start the interview as we are. It's just nice and. Is that Guinness? You have that? It's why I like seeing people when I interview them. You see, because I can interview them about what's behind them on their desks and things.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
I find it fascinating. I'm meeting up with Jamie.
Jamie Thompson or
Jamie Thompson, yes, and we're meeting at a pub, so that's going to be an interesting interview.
Yeah, try and get the interview done early on.
I'm not saying it.
That's all I need to say.
So, I mean, Joe, you, obviously,
Yeah.
I've been following your career for quite some time, and
Yeah.
one thing that Wiki's very good at is digging out things I didn't know about you. Obviously, I know about your Lone Wolf books because I adore them.
Thank
I
you.
was growing up, and they really kind of hit home. I think for a lot of teenagers, they do. I think that's a thing about being a lone wolf and just finding your footing in life. And is that why you set out? Did you have any kind of clear vision when you first started writing?
No, I had a clear vision of the saga, that's for sure. That was burning in my mind quite brightly, and it still is. But it's interesting. Your story is a story I hear a lot at conventions and meets and signings and the like, and all over the world. And it's typically guys of your generation, which is one step below mine. 40-somethings, early 40-somethings.
How did you know?
Well, you just do the math.
Shine off my head.
Lone Wolf started in '84, so I'm looking at 41-year-olds as my core market now.
Yeah.
And the story is wonderfully the same. It's that they've grown up with it, they've stayed with it. It was a big influence on them, and they generally come along to say thanks and chat about all the minutiae of the series. So it's quite a test for me in some cases.
Yeah, well, I like to go back to where it first started for you as a writer. Were you a gamer first and then a writer, or was it something you had as a child that you developed?
Right. I guess I was a gamer before I was a writer, but I was back in the prehistoric ages prior to Dungeons and Dragons. And so my early gaming experiences were really tabletop wargaming, historically mainly. But I had this hankering to introduce fantasy into my medieval games. And I was running a medieval campaign around about 75. God, that's 40 years ago. I'd played around with the idea of bringing armies in, but there was nothing that really crystallized my thoughts. And then I was working in Los Angeles in 77. I discovered the second set of D&D, the 3-booklet set, purely by chance. And it was, as you know, written by Gary Gygax. I happened to be playing his rules, his chainmail medieval tabletop rules. So hence the immediate interest. And I still remember vividly that eureka moment when I flicked through it and suddenly it dawned on me what I had in my hands here, how absolutely amazing this thing was. And it's just what I needed. So I sort of did a house adaptation.
What age
so then I was about, in 75, I was born in 56. Okay. So I guess I was 19 then, but in 77 I was 21. And I was working in Los Angeles for 6 months. Bit of a dream job, actually. I was a recording engineer, and I was exchanged with an American recording engineer because that's how it worked back then. It was a sort of exchange work visa. And so there I am, 21 years old, Los Angeles, 1977. Yeah. It doesn't get any better than that. It was fantastic. But I had a fair bit of spare time, and so I sort of boned up on D&D. And by the time I got back to the UK, I was ready to roll. So I introduced it into my fantasy campaign, and then started a proper D&D campaign about 77. But it was still based in the fantasy world I'd created for my tabletop role-playing.
Right.
And that was the world of Magnamund. That was created late 75, early 76. And that's the world of Lone Wolf.
So why did you feel, because there must have been lots of campaigns around at the time that were pre-written, what did you feel that was lacking that you wanted to add, or was it just a burning desire to create your own world?
No, actually there wasn't any campaigns that were pre-written.
Okay.
The D&D really didn't catch on here until about 78, when Stephen Ian at Workshop got the license to distribute in Europe, and then the floodgates opened, and from really 78 through to 83, 84, it was a golden age of role-playing. It exploded. And it was just a fantastic time to be involved in it. And then we saw the campaigns coming out of TSR that built on the second set. And, they let slip the dogs of war, as they say. And my God, they were hungry. and spread all over the world, and it was an amazing phenomenon.
Yeah.
It was something completely new, a whole new intellectual entity, and it captured the imagination of an awful lot of people at that time. And being one of the early adopters, as it were, when the opportunity came in '83 for me to produce a role-playing game based on this world I created and populated and detailed for the better part of 7 or 8 years, very developed by that stage. It struck me that the best road I should follow was that of a solo campaign rather than a role-playing game, because there were other role-playing games on the market at that time, D&D being the most popular, but there was RuneQuest and there was Call of Cthulhu and Bushido, and others were steaming in. So I thought, I don't really want to get lost in the mix. And then I had another wonderful eureka moment when I realized that there are an awful lot more bookshops in the world than there are game shops.
Indeed.
And then I decided, what I need to do is a solo role-playing campaign in book form. And my unique selling point, as the jargon goes these days, is the fact that nobody had done it before.
Yes.
And I had a very clear vision of what I wanted to achieve with it.
Or since?
And,
has anyone else tried to?
There have been a 4-book series, and there's been 6 or 7 book series, but I've got a 32-book series
Yes.
that takes the main character from a young 15-year-old, not the brightest tool in the box, not the sharpest, all the way up to Supreme Master of the Kite, which was a little short of demigod status by the time you've completed the saga. And it's a very interesting story, even though I'm bound to say it myself. It is a very interesting story. But what really made it successful is that the fans really appreciated the character and identified with the character and loved the exploration and the discovery of going through the books one by one as they were consecutive. And you carried things over like in a real role-playing game, and your character developed and you got more skills, and things you found in one book may be used in another in the series. Stuff you may have discovered that didn't seem relevant suddenly becomes relevant 3 or 4 books later. So there was a lot of I structured it quite carefully to get the most out of that medium.
When you're writing, you said you had the whole campaign pretty much set out from the start, or do you have that as a structure?
Yes, I had the first 12. I had the first 12 books clearly in mind. When I got a publishing deal in '83, and the first 2 books were published in '84, I had a 4-book deal, but the publishers knew that I had 12 books in mind. And the first 2 books were released together in July of '84 and were phenomenal. Had a huge success. And it's worth bearing in mind that this was pre-computer, this was pre-console. Really, books were the medium. There was very little to touch it. And the sales back in those days were astronomical compared to, say, today. I mean, as an example, to get into the top 5 in the Sunday Times bestseller list, you need to sell around about 25 to 30,000 copies. Well, books 1 and books 2 each sold 100,000 copies in the first week of their release. Yeah, that gives you some idea of how big the book market was back then. It's a fraction of the size now because it's been dissipated into other medium, electronic medium and computers and other forms of entertainment.
Had you written anything before then?
I'd written reports and sort of battle write-ups for my players, and had always got good feedback from those. English was certainly my strongest subject at school. And I had a very enlightened teacher who sort of turned me on to Tolkien and to Michael Moorcock and Mervyn Peake and T.H. White, and hugely influential stuff just at the time I needed it when I was 14. And so I stoked up my subconscious with all of this fantasy material, not really with any serious intent of using it professionally later on. It's just I really enjoyed it. But it gave me a really solid cultural background, a cultural archive almost, to draw upon later on. That served me very well since.
What was the temptation not to just write a traditional novel and go for the game book instead?
uniqueness,
Yeah.
the fact that nobody had done it before. And the fact that what I loved about it was that I'd had plenty of game mastering experience and was very comfortable in that role. In fact, I was always in that role. And I didn't see it as anything different. I was still talking to the reader, to the player. And I'd known from, good feedback I'd had from friends over the years that they really liked my writing style. Yeah. And that has been borne out since. And the readers would not have come back if they didn't enjoy what they were reading.
No.
And that's how it. There's a firm foundation that was set, and I've been building on it ever since.
I want to come back to Lone Wolf in a minute, but I want to get something I read which I've heard of, and I know it's been going for a little while. It was you won the Dungeons and Dragons Championships in America.
Yeah, this was really in its infancy. This was back in '82. It was held in Baltimore.
How do you win Dungeons and Dragons?
I have been asked this probably several thousand times because it's a team game. It's not really a winner take all game. So what they did, which was quite clever, is that they set up a series of games, and then they had judges observing the game, and then they awarded points to who they felt was playing the best, was role playing their character to the best. And we started off quite low, 1 to 3rd level AD&D, and the winners went through to the next stage, and so on and so on. So I ended up in the final, and I think there were 6 of us in the final in total, by which time we were playing 13th level. And I was, I picked, because you pick the character at random before it started, and I chose a 13th level mercenary thief. So it was pretty clear to me from a nanosecond after I'd read the brief what I had to do, and that was to look out for number 1 and try and get out of there alive and with all the loot. Which, to make a long story short, that's basically what I did. Wow! And there was quite a wonderful climax to the game as well. And this was in a sort of lecture hall or auditorium, so there was a lot of people watching it at that time because it was the final leg. It was the final. And the situation was that I managed to do the dirty on the other players, and it was like Indiana Jones. I grabbed the loot, got out of the tomb, and set off all traps behind me. And it was kind of fait accompli, really. Who else could they award it to? I was the only survivor, and I played my part perfectly. But what the judges said they really appreciated was I was giving them notes throughout the 4 or 5 hours we played, as were the other players. And some were dummies and some were actual notes. But as we went through each stage of the adventure, I was noting where I could set up a trap.
Right.
And I had enough dexterity and, sneakiness to be able to do it. So I set up traps all the way through. And then when the time came for, I got my hands on the loot and ran, I was setting these things off behind me.
Yeah.
So if you've ever seen... Where Eagles Dare, that famous World War II film. When they're escaping from the castle, they're setting off all the booby traps they've laid on the way in. And I had that in mind.
Wow.
So these things were slowing them down. And the final one, which would have slowed them down but not killed them, was that I set off a pit trap. And I was fortunately on the right side of it. But inadvertently, when I did that, it brought the ceiling down on them. So it was game over, literally. It was very funny, especially, and it was particularly sweet because I was the only English guy there. So they felt very aggrieved that this Brit had, won the award.
And do you still play? Do you still play D&D, or do you?
I play. I probably play 2 or 3 times a year, but I don't get to GM these days.
Yeah, where do you play it?
So when I'm invited to.
Oh right, okay, you've got lots of invites now.
Yeah, very often. Yeah, it's sitting on a game at a convention or. Typically it's that.
But do you more tabletop role play now, or do you do with the figures?
I still tabletop wargame.
Yeah.
And I have huge armies. You can see in the background here some of the preparation I do. So I've amassed huge tabletop armies of the countries in Magnamund. So I have Magnamund armies, which is very nice. And so I think it was back in the late 80s when I was doing a newsletter for the fan club, and I ran a series of battle days for the fans, and basically they came over to my house. I set up a game. They played a game set in Magdeburg with the whole scenario for the game, using the armies they'd been reading about. So
Wow, fantastic.
yeah, and I still get letters, and I still get contact on Facebook from the guys who are now in their early 40s and were then sort of in their early teens, saying they'll never forget it. They've still got the photos, and
Yeah.
what a fantastic time they had. And
Did you write all the novelizations as well of the Lone Wolf?
no, the novel. There was a series of 12 novels that I did with John Grant, and basically I wrote the first one and then worked with John on the others.
Right.
The novels were based on the game books, and the game books came first. So chronologically, the game books came out. By the time the first and second novels came out, I was up to probably about game book 11 or 12. So John had an awful lot of material to base his contribution on. And then he would do the first draft, and then I'd come in and I'd do my bit and then edit it. And then it would go off to the publisher. So we did that for about 4 years or so. So it was 12 books in 4 years.
I remember going for a very long walk in a forest, listening to one of the audiobooks of those novelizations, and it was great because I was actually walking through the story,
going through
expecting things to jump out at me, and
it
feeling
would
very
have probably
powerful.
been the first one, which was Flight from the Dark.
Yes, pretty much.
That was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun doing the music in the background. So
Oh really? Oh, of course.
oh, really?
I will get onto that because yeah. in fact, Public Image Limited, they're playing down in Bexhill near me very soon.
Give John all my best wishes.
Yeah, I'm going to try and get backstage if I can. Yes, now, Lone Wolf now it is carrying on, so it's changed several publishers, hasn't it? You've had a bit of a time having.
Yeah, it's gone through. It's been around now for the better part of 30 plus years.
Yes.
So the early stages it was with Hutchinson, who then joined another company called Century to become Century Hutchinson. Then they were bought out by Random House, so it became Random Century. And then they lost the Century bit, it became Random House. And so that kind of bit evolved. And then by around about 95, 96, it was starting to plateau. The whole game book thing was starting to flatten out entirely. And this was mainly due to the advent of PlayStation 1. And it explains a lot why there's a gap in the saga. I completed book 28 in 98, I think it was 90. Well, it was published in 98, but I finished it in 96. And I've only now completed book 29. So, and this for Lone Wolf fans is huge news. At last, the saga will be completed. Book 29, The Storms of Chai, comes out in the UK on the 19th of December.
Brilliant.
It's actually coming out in Italy first on the 29th of October in Italian.
I saw the cover
It's
art
partly
last
logistics.
night.
Sorry?
I saw the cover
yes.
art last night. Absolutely beautiful cover.
Yeah. Alberto Delago is just a genius.
Yeah.
He's an old school Italian artist.
Yes.
Magnificent. He's done some
And that
magnificent.
scene is depicting some kind of flight from.
It's depicting a very stormy crossing of a place called the Tacoma Estuary, and that's part of the adventure. That's quite a key part of the adventure.
Yeah.
So it's really a snapshot of just how difficult that crossing is in the midst of a virtually supernatural storm that's going on.
Yes.
And what I love about that piece of work is that Alberto has really captured the threat and menace in a symbolic way within the waves. So if you look very closely at the art, and I recommend you zoom in on it, you'll see all the creatures in amongst the waves that the actual water forms the shapes.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's quite clever.
That's fantastic. The original artwork was done by Gary Chalk, is that right? And,
Not at that stage, no. Gary and I worked on the original books.
yes.
I wrote them, Gary illustrated them. And then we parted in 86. So it was only about 2 years after Lone Wolf was out and running. And Gary went off and did another project of his, Fantasy Warlord, I think it was. I'd then teamed up with Brian Williams, and Brian and I worked together right the way through to book 28. Sadly, Brian passed away about 5 years ago, late 50s. It was really well before his time, and a sad loss to fantasy art. But he had this wonderful knack of being able to envisage exactly what I had in mind. He could read my descriptive text, and he could produce a visualization almost exactly as I saw it when I created it. And he was the easiest guy to work with, and I miss him dearly, actually. He was a very good friend. But he produced a fantastic portfolio of work that lives on today.
How do obviously the visuals are important in these kind of books. How do they come about choosing? Do you say, I'd like you to illustrate this, or do they read through it and say, I think this will work well?
Typically I produce what's called an art brief, which is instructions to the artist. So I'll produce a cover art brief and an internal illustrations brief for the artists. And having done this for 30 years, I kind of know what they need. So it's quite detailed, and I may bring in other references that they can look at and be influenced by. But very often the internal art brief runs to 40 pages, and the cover brief 5 or 6 pages with plus illustrations that I've stolen off the net, placed in the document, so at least they get some visual idea of kind of what I have in mind. That's very much how I work with Alberto, for instance. So I would have briefed him very detailed and very thoroughly about the cover. And there's a lot of daily toing and froing on email, and lots of sketches, going backwards and forwards. And then, once we're ready to go, he'll produce his pencil roughs, then he'll ink those roughs, and then take it through 2 or 3 stages until we get to the final artwork. And he does all the lovely tweaking, and
it looks amazing.
Brightens it up.
It blew me away. So it's,
yes, have a look at his other stuff as well for the earlier books 1 through to. I think you can see 1 through to 7 are available. Yes. These are for the Italian editions. Okay, and they are all masterpieces. They are absolutely wonderful. And I kind of discovered him in a way. He was at a very big Italian game show called Luca Comics and Games, which happens at the end of October every year. And a Lone Wolf fan, or Lupo Solitario, as they call it there, and came over, showed me some sketches and roughs. I thought, this guy is not bad, but he was still young. He was still naive in his style and everything. But I could see he had the makings. He had it was worth spending time with.
Yes.
And I kind of nurtured him. And so I got him to do the covers on the early Mongoose editions of the Lone Wolf Collector series, which is the hardcover game books. And then he's progressed steadily from there. He's got better and better and better, and now he's really, he's getting towards his peak. And his latest work for the Vincent Books editions, which is the Italian editions, is just wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
Why is there different artwork for different countries?
The main reason is that publishers have a very clear idea of their cultural requirement, and it's different in every country. So it is more common than not that you will have different covers in different countries. And that's always been the case with my stuff. So Gary did the very first covers for the UK editions, but the Americans looked at that and said, that's not going to work in our market. We want a different approach. And they hired a fantastic artist, by the way. They hired Richard Corbin, which is just, world class. And he did my early covers there, and it was just, they knew their market. They knew what they needed. And the same was true of France and Germany and Spain and Italy. They hired their own artists to do their flavour, if you like, their flavour of art that they knew would work. And then on top of that, very often a long-running series like Lone Wolf gets refreshed every 3 or 4 years, and new covers are brought in. And that is sort of that's to appeal to the next generation coming up. So as taste slightly changed, they changed the covers.
Where's your biggest market at the moment? Is it?
I'd say it was Italy at the moment.
Really?
And Italy, yes, funnily enough, Italy has been very strong for me right from the beginning. It's a unique market and very loyal, and very large. Close second, I'd say, would be USA. USA historically was my huge market, was my main market. But after the plateau, as I call it, of '96, and then Lone Wolf came back into fashion and resurged in 2002. So after about 6 years, it all came around again. So it changed and it adopted a new style, and the new books came out with new covers.
Yeah. And you had some other books that I remember playing. Was it the Combat?
Oh yes, Combat Heroes.
The Combat Heroes. They were fantastic, and really,
Thank you.
I really enjoyed those. Was it the White Wizard and Scarlet Sorcerer?
Yeah, White Wizard, a Black Baron,
Black Baron. Yeah.
Scarlet Sorcerer,
Can
Emerald
you briefly
Enchant.
explain that to people who might not be?
In a
aware?
nutshell, it was first-person computer gaming. Right? It was Doom in a book.
Yeah.
About 5 years before Doom showed up.
Yeah.
So it was, it was first-person experience, visual experience. 5 years before it became available technically.
It must have been a nightmare to work out, or was it mathematically quite straightforward? But
A bit of both. There were mathematics to it, but it was a nightmare because there were so many variables.
Yes.
That I really tested my basic maths.
And didn't you do one which was ships as well?
There were airships.
Airships, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
Which was basically a dungeon, but in 3 dimensions, and so it wasn't just turning corners and walking forward and turning around and walking back. It was
more complicated. Just
it was deliberately made it more complicated.
At that stage, you stopped.
I thought, oh my God, I've done that I've done the simple dungeon crawl.
Yeah, so
you
like a challenge.
Push it.
Then.
Do
You like
something
to
else.
find something a little bit different and new. Have you got anything that? I mean, obviously, Lone Wolf is coming to an end. He says tentatively, so I'm sure it won't.
Gosh, no, it's stronger than ever, quite frankly.
Yeah. So when you get to book 30 and
32.
32.
Yep.
What are your plans? Can you say? Have you got?
Tell you the ending.
Well, you must. You've got something that you must have. Burning to do.
Oh, I have, and I've probably been working on that for about 6 years at the same preparation time as I did for the World of Magnamund. So yeah, that's waiting impatiently in the wings for me to complete the Lone Wolf saga. But it's a very strange and exciting place to be now. Right, after 30 years of writing, I'm coming to the end of this long road, this great road I've been following, and I'm just still like a kid on Christmas morning when I think about what I'm going to be putting into those last 2 books, especially.
Yeah.
The fans won't be disappointed. It's got a pretty impressive ending.
Oh, fantastic.
But obviously, I can't. I daren't reveal it.
Of course.
It's been huge speculation on the net, as you'd expect. But I'm pleased to say nobody's actually nailed it. Nobody's got the final scenario, which I'm delighted about because it will be a surprise to everybody.
And any talk of films being made of?
Oh gosh, there is always talk of films being made. I've been talking about films being made for probably the last 20 years. And it goes through a kind of a standard procedure these days. I'll get a phone call, usually from the States. It's a production company. They want to secure the film rights. They want to, what they call, buy an option on those film rights, which is typically for 18 months. Now, why do they want to do that? Well, it's so that they can then go to various production companies and backers and raise the funds to make the film. So you're giving them the sole right, kind of like your agency, really. And then they will go out and see where they can sell it. And this has happened 4 times now. And every time the option has expired, it's typically for 18 months. And if they haven't made a go of it in 18 months, then the option expires and that's it. I get to keep the money. Thank you very much. And they go on their way. And then I just wait patiently for another 2 or 3 years. And the phone rings again and it's another production house wanting to do the same thing.
So your hopes aren't massively up at the moment. But maybe
it's very frustrating, actually, at this point.
It's in book form and game form. Maybe it's something that shouldn't be.
No, because the scripts have been prepared in a traditional format. And the story within Lone Wolf is very strong indeed. So it would make an ideal. It would make a very good TV series now.
Yes, I think that's a Game of Thrones style thing would be
exactly. Now that is
suited.
it's probably more viable because there's so much story
Yeah.
and development of characters over a long time.
And
So that,
has someone approached you about a TV series?
in a roundabout sort of way,
Yeah.
the film company approached me about a series.
You know,
I keep my fingers crossed, but I've got this sort of fatalistic view of it these days. I know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's inevitable because there's so much good material there, and it's so well known worldwide. Now, whether I'm still around to see it happen is another matter.
Oh,
That I'm not so
you're
sure
still
about.
young.
Relatively.
Now you've also got computer games of it, and you've had
Yes.
have for many years. What's the latest incarnation that people play on their iPhone or tablet devices?
Yeah, this is a game called Joe Deaver's Lone Wolf, and the first one came out in November 2013 for smartphones and tablets, and it was a 4-part release, and the final part was released in November of last year, I think November, so it took a year for the whole thing to come out. It was then produced for PCs and Macs via Steam, so you can go on Steam and download the entire game. And that was a high definition version, a much better version of it, obviously for machines that are more powerful. It's done rather well. It's sold over 2.5 million copies. So
Very well.
publishers seem to be very happy about it. And the public certainly are. And it has actually brought a whole new wave of Lone Wolf fans into my world.
Yes.
Through that, through that game. They've kind of discovered the work in that computer game, and now they're filling up my Facebook and joining all the various sort of pages and clubs, and also buying the other stuff, buying the books again.
Okay, well, let's find out the best way to get hold of the books and how to contact you, or and how to sort of find out about Lone Wolf and your work. Where would
Right.
they go?
Okay, the best place to go is a place called Project Aeon. Aeon is the universe of Lone Wolf, so that's AON. And if you do a web search for projectaeon.org, O-R-G, this is a huge archive and database that contains virtually everything Lone Wolf, plus everything else that I've done, which you touched on, things like Combat Heroes, Freeway Warrior, Grey Star, a lot of other series that I've written. It has all of the books available for download, plus everything else. I mean, even obscure stuff in the archive, like magazine articles in the 80s, or all the old News Club newsletters. But the best news of all, it's entirely free.
So
Yeah, I
jealous
know.
of you.
I know this is going out podcast audio, but the look on your face is priceless right now. It's like, what?
Why? No.
What the heck? What? You're giving it away? Kind of, yeah. I'd made a decision back in the year 2000 as a Millennium gift that I'd make it all available for free download online, really because I wanted to ensure that the fans could get the copies they'd missed. And at that time, Lone Wolf had been out of print for about 4 years. And it was very difficult for them to get certainly some of the later books. And they were going for ridiculous prices on eBay and the like. $300-400 a piece was not uncommon. And for some titles, it's still, $200 or $300 each. So I just made this crazy decision that I'm going to give them free access to it.
Yeah.
Now, in doing that, the guys who run the fan club did a fantastic job because they digitized all my work. And bear in mind that the first 5 books were written longhand and then typed up and then delivered to the publisher. And it wasn't until I got to around about book 8 or book 9 that was actually using a word processor. So it shows you how old this thing is, really, or how old I am. And so the early stuff wasn't in digital form. They digitized it in order to make it available for download. But they did a lot more than that as well. They created the software that would run the program so that it would take care of the bookkeeping. So it would take care of your stats, automatically update and change your statistics as you go through the adventure, keep a track of your endurance, combat scores, items you're carrying, arrows you've used, and that sort of thing. And it made it very playable. It made it very playable indeed. But they went beyond that as well. They've now produced ebook versions, and versions for Kindle and all of the
Still
various
free?
books. Still free,
Good
and
Lord.
for phones.
Wow.
Yeah, amazing.
Not the future ones, though. You're not going to give those.
No,
Not for a while.
No, but certainly up to book 28, and then book 29 is coming out in December. So you can really bring yourself up to date by visiting Project Aeon.
Wow.
And then delve. A word of warning: it is very addictive. So you should at least cut out 3 hours before you go anywhere near the site, because once you're on there, you won't want to leave.
That's
and
brilliant.
I issue this warning, and people laugh, and then they come back to me and said, "You were absolutely right. I was on it all night."
Fantastic.
Sampling bits, reading bits, downloading things. It's a fantastic archive.
Yeah.
And my decision which seems crazy back then to a lot of people, to actually, make my work available for free, turned out probably to be one of the best business decisions I've ever made, because I got so much goodwill out of doing that, and I managed, I created digital versions that I could use later on when it was republished. But the main thing is it kept the whole genre, it kept the whole franchise alive. People could access it, they could read it, and it continued to grow. And now it's a fantastic gateway, as I'm sort of demonstrating here in a way, for people to find out a bit about it at no cost to themselves and make their decision. If they like it, if they love it, it's all there for them to go for. And then if they're feeling, particularly generous, they want to, buy something, kind of.
Well, it'd be impossible not to, wouldn't it? If they got to book 28. Another
30 years of my work on plate for you.
That's extraordinary.
But it's still got to be good. People, as you know, I often think twice about getting involved in a new franchise, as it were, because of the time it takes. So to actually start a new role-playing game, for instance, it's quite a commitment in time and effort, and the money is sort of secondary, really. It's once you're hooked on it, you're going to be spending hours and hours and hours. This way, you can check it out.
Yeah.
And if you really like it, then there is an awful lot of stuff available at the moment, aside from the written word. The new Lone Wolf adventure game that's come out. It's actually out this week. It ships this week in the UK.
Oh, brilliant. So what's it called?
It's called the Lone Wolf Adventure Game.
Right.
It's a role-playing game in the traditional
okay.
sense. At last, you may say.
No.
It's been through iterations in the past, but this is the real McCoy. This is how I've always wanted it to be done.
And who's publishing that?
Publishing it's Cubicle 7 Entertainment.
Okay.
They're well known for their Doctor Who and Lord of the Rings. So I'm in good company with them, and fantastic outfit to work with. Really, just absolutely perfect. It's quality first with them, and it really shows. And we launched it officially at Gen Con this year in the States, back at the beginning of August. It sold out completely and got fantastic press. And again, the good news is the price.
Okay.
Now,
Go on.
Go into a typical game shop or online and you buy something these days, you can be looking at £40 to £50 for the box set. And all that. That's kind of the typical. We weren't happy with that because we designed the game so that new players and players with no experience of role-playing at all could get stuck into it and be playing within 10 minutes.
Brilliant.
Now, that sounds a crazy ambition, but we've achieved it with this. So we've used a very simple set of basic rules.
Yes.
But we haven't alienated the fans and the die-hard role players because we have the more advanced rules running alongside. So when you feel you're up to it, when you feel ready, you can introduce rules as you go and build on those at your own pace. So very simple to get started. Wonderfully simple. It's like the game books that I wrote. It's kind of based on that basic system, which is simple and effective.
Okay, so you've got the same kind of thing. So you've got GM, and how many players do you normally? Two
yes,
players?
we've got the GM, the narrator in this game because it's kind of more cinematic. We don't want you to get too bogged down in looking up tables and charts and the minutiae of the detail and so on. That's not to say it's light. Okay. It has the rules are there if you want to introduce them. You can bring them in, so you can tailor it to your own requirement. So the optimum number of players is probably 6 at the most. Yeah. We have 6 pre-gen characters in the box, so you can start straight away. You can pick one of the 6 and begin play. So a narrator plus 6 would be, that would be the max. Okay. But typically 4 plus the narrator would be what I'd expect to see.
Is the emphasis on character and storytelling, or or the campaign or combat, or is where would you say?
Gosh, it's a bit of everything in that regard. The story is very strong because it's based, in the Lone Wolf world. The big difference, though, is that Lone Wolf isn't in the story. He can't be in the story. How can you play a Kai Lord if the first book opens with the massacre of the Kai? Yeah. So you can't really role play a Kai Lord if they're all dead. And if you want to role play Lone Wolf, the one character, then read the game books, because that's what that's all about. But if we're going to create a role playing game in which you can play Kai Lords, what we chose to do is to set it 50 years before the massacre of the Kai in Game Book 1. Okay, this is when the Kai Order is at its height, at its absolute peak, and it's the perfect time to set the role-playing game, not least because a narrator who knows the saga will have in the back of his mind 50 years on there's going to be this monumentous event, and you can kind of tailor your long-term campaign towards either stopping it or letting it happen. And 50 years is a long time of role-playing, so I don't think, I think everybody's going to be satisfied in the interim. It's set in the game time of 5,000, the year 5,000. And to give you an example, Lone Wolf is born in 5035. So it's 35 years before Lone Wolf is born. But it's a great time for the Kai Order. They're really, something special at that time. And in the game, you start as Kai Lords, and you're all Kai Lords, young initiates, typically, 14 to 18, that sort of age group. And then through the supplementary adventures that are in the box set, plus the additionals that are on their way, you can either run a campaign based on what we're producing, but there are really well-crafted guidelines to help you create your own ones.
You're going to create yourself.
Yes, you can. Yeah,
create a new Joe Diva. It's going to be
I do encourage that.
Fantastic.
So see, secure in 30 years of establishment. But no, there's nothing I'd love more than for it to inspire people to, create their own aspect of Magnum. As I say in the game, it's it's a time for you to rise as heroes within this world. Yes. And there's plenty of room for you. Now, as I said, you start as Kai Lords, but there are an awful lot of other player character types available in the world, and they will be coming through quite shortly with a supplement called Heroes of Magnamund, and that, I believe, has 16 new player character types of huge diversity as well. Ones that the game book readers will be very familiar with, like Duranese Knights of the White Mountain, Vikerys warrior lords, even Ice Barbarians, Telkoi warriors, a big selection. And then you can start as initiates in those orders, in those character classes, and rise in rank and achieve, success within that new character type. And then obviously then feeds into much more diverse teams playing. Okay, so the players can then be one of each. You may have a dwarven gunner with his musket, and a Somlending Knight of the Realm, and perhaps a young Kai Lord, and a rather
this is something
you can even have buccaneers and magicians galore. So there's a lot of choice coming very shortly. So we'll be seeing Heroes released probably in March of next year.
Fantastic. So
the first and the major release in the supplements is going to be Sommerland.
Yes.
Okay, and that's the country in which Lone Wolf comes from. That's where it's set. And the Sommerland sourcebook is a huge database. It's going to run to about 400 pages, and there's more than enough information and scenario seeds in there to keep you busy for a good 3 or 4 years. Yeah. Even before you venture further afield. So particularly pleased with Sommerland. Spent a lot of time working on that one, and those that have read it are very impressed.
I think it's an incredible world you've built, and I think it's going to last for many, many years, and it's highly regarded now, and it will be for a long time.
Hopefully.
So are you on Twitter as well, and you're on Facebook, or is the Aeon website the best one to go for?
Aeon is the one that will give you everything that you're looking for. It'll give you the full background to Lone Wolf and access to all of the material, all of the game books and everything. I'd also recommend you follow me on Facebook. Okay, quite easy to just search for Joe Dever. There's not many of us around, and you'll find me. I'm maxed out on friends.
Yeah,
but you can definitely follow me, because I've opened up the followers sort of status, so you can post messages and you can get updates, and it's a very good way of keeping in touch with the news as it happens. I tend to update my Facebook every day, and all the new stuff appears there first.
Fantastic.
So with those two, I haven't got time for Twitter, unfortunately.
No,
I can see the appeal, but my God,
you can only.
I've got to get some work done.
Yeah.
I could spend all my time on social media and not actually produce any material. So fantastic. I have to be, a little bit disciplined in that regard.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely amazing and a delight to meet you.
Thank you.
Skype to Skype. And,
your first Skype. I'm very pleased.
Yeah, no, I had delight. It's
had a good experience.
So do follow Joe. Do get into his world if you're not familiar with it. And thank you again very much for your time. My pleasure. Thanks a lot, Arnie. Thanks. Take care.
Okay, what we forgot to mention at the end of that interview was the price of Joe's Lone Wolf game, role-playing game, which is out now, by the way. So if you backed him during Kickstarter, it should be arriving any day if it hasn't arrived already. The amazing price, if you're going to buy this, is $19.95. Under 20 quid for a role-play game. That's unheard of nowadays. Get it, it's amazing, and enjoy it. Enter the world if you don't know it. Otherwise, get on to Project Aeon. Okay, so don't forget, back our Kickstarter. If you don't want to back it, fair enough. Just share it. For now, thank you very much. Next podcast, Jamie Thompson.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe. We want to hear from you. Find and follow us on Twitter @TheFantasyPod.